time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand. With your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
Hey there, welcome back. Today we thought we would talk about brand and artificial intelligence.
Oh gosh, what a topic. Obviously something that is new, it's fun, it's a toy, it's shaking up and scaring some industries, including our own, as more and more use of artificial intelligence in the creative arts is on the forefront. And there probably is a place for it in industries. But I think when it comes to brand, you'd agree, Reilly, there's dangers in how it can be used, but more importantly, just the overall quality. And right now we think is high, but in the end, it's going to have an impact on brand.
Yes. Yep. And I feel like it's like any tool that comes into the world where no matter a hammer or a screwdriver, you can cause a lot of destruction with those. And so knowing with artificial intelligence and AI, being able to go, okay, how is this tool best used, and how can you use it to benefit your brand and your business along the way, and not just using it because it's the new flashy, hot topic of the current moment.
I think it's fun, I've gotten even just to like start to explore, to get into this whole thing with prompts and artificial intelligence. And a lot of people, I think it's so foreign that people don't understand it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of irrational fears for the place it's going to have as we see it more and more being utilized, embraced, and new companies emerging that are like trying to be pioneers in their market sector with terms of using it or
it's like everything now has an AI. Every time I get a software update now, it's like now with AI capabilities.
Yeah,
like it's
Illustrator,
now.
A lot of the tools of our trade in creative arts, Photoshop, Illustrator, Adobe. Adobe has Firefly, which is their AI component for generating stuff. And I've dabbled around just to even see what it's all about without any real serious use of it.
Experimenting,
and I can see the fun in it. It's a fun little toy. It's like getting, back when Instagram first came out and it was all about, filters. You get the bunny ear filters and the fish lip filters. And it's kind of like it's a fun entertainment thing, right? Telling a computer what you want it to draw or say, or whether it's write a story or storyboard a cartoon or generate a logo or an illustration or a photograph.
Yeah, it is cool. It's very cool.
And so it has its merits, but I think when it comes to brand, I think as we're seeing more and more a push for utilizing AI in creating creative visual problem solving.
Yep.
I think that's where there's deception in the type of results and maybe the level of results that you're going to get by using that.
Talking about results, going, okay, what does that mean exactly? I think we first need to rewind and go, okay, what is AI? Like, how does this thing actually work? Because really only very small percentage of the population is actually playing with AI and experimenting and doing those things. So those who may not be familiar with it or have actually spent time to research and kind of start getting their feet wet, it's like understanding how the most popular, version of AI right now is the large language models, the LLM, like ChatGPT, and all these other ones that are out there, but and they're getting a lot of focus right now. But understanding how those actually work. I know you kind of dug into that. So from your perspective, how are you seeing these kind of these dots align of how this thing actually processes information?
Well, I mean, it's done with prompts, and many times, it's working with amassing millions. It's built utilizing, where literally researchers they'll data mine. They'll take images and feed in the computer, and they're going to give qualifiers, going to keywords to all these types of images, and they're creating those instances, and then it's creating a huge, massive database, and then the computer is searching based on the prompts and pulling in and assessing all of these images and creating a fusion of them, or in some sense, and I know you've talked about it, brought up that element of averaging the results based on what the people want to see, what it predicts, right? The most commonality among all the images, that's what's going to guess is going to please you in response to your prompt for what you want it to render.
Yeah. And that's really where people need to realize, with whether it's ChatGPT or any AI, even a chatbot on some company's website, it's using predictive software and predictive algorithms, just like Instagram uses an algorithms of going, oh, Scott's most likely going to like this product or this image. Reilly's going to like this image or this product. And so it's all trying to predict what that next move is. And so even the crazy thing about ChatGPT is that it's predicting the next words as it's writing, which is incredible because it is, like you said, it's sourcing all this information across the entire internet, which is just insane to think about that it's even doing that. And so as this thing's predicting, how do you predict something is by averaging out what's most likely going to happen next. And that is the average, right? That's the bell curve. That is, okay, this is most likely going to happen next, which is, it's crazy in of itself, but is that true creativity? Is that true, I don't want to say intelligence, because that is knowledge to know that and to be able to figure that out. But it's like, where does this go for businesses and brands? And, I always use the example of what Heinz ketchup did, where they did an entire campaign where if you ask, Mid-Journey, which is a artificial intelligence that does artwork, to do a picture of ketchup, just the general term ketchup, it does bottles that all look like the Heinz ketchup bottle. Because if I ask anyone, hey, think of a bottle of ketchup or think of ketchup, they'll most likely think of a bottle that looks similar to Heinz, because it's just common. It's like if I say, think of a can of soup, you'll probably think of a red and white can. Or if I say, think of a bottle of soda, you'll think of something that looks like Coke.
Yeah, like a red label, or even like
or
the
even
iconic profile.
They trademark
bottle.
that. That profile of the bottle.
You brought up a interesting thing with the correlation between the need for the request by the market, by the sectors, by what we're asking of artificial intelligence to be creative. And already the way it's constructed, it comes up with more average, right? Still pleasing. If I said, hey, I want a photograph of a giant hippopotamus balancing on a circus ball, and juggling 12 pizzas.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to paint me something that looks photographically real, that's whimsical, it's common, and it's fun, right? It did its job. But they're actually, when it comes to creativity and intelligence, since we're talking about artificial intelligence, which, very high intelligence. I mean, if you look at AI and an intelligence computer, it's sourcing, it's how it works, how it functions. It's one of the highest forms, right? But it's artificial. You look at human intelligence, and there was a study done in 1964 by a guy named Donald McKinnon, and this is at UC Berkeley, and he was doing a correlational study on intelligence and creativity, and he brought in creative problem-solving type of professions: scientists, engineers, architects, novelists, poets, designers, things like that. And they did a bunch of different tests. And what they found was that there was really no huge correlation between high intelligence and high creative output. What it came down to was that they found that the individuals that were the most creative in their output were ones that were able to achieve a mood, a state of mind that allowed their natural creativity to flourish, to thrive, to function in their creative problem solving. And this mood, this mindset, was that of a state of play, almost childlike play. And when you think of a child, whether he's picking up a little piece of driftwood, at the beach and pretending it's a horse, mounting a giant mountain with a dragon at top, right? It's an age of discovery, of exploration, of not having any boundaries, and not having to think logically through that. And that stands alone, irregardless of intelligence. A classic example, if you look at Christianity, Jesus was talking about having the faith of a childlike faith. Again, it's that idea of everything doesn't have to fit in a box. Everything doesn't have to be fully figured out and explained. There's art of believing just for the sake of believing, like a child would. Same thing goes with creativity. There's that idea of play, of freeing oneself. And that is good. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of goes counter to what and how artificial intelligence functions and works.
Yep. Yeah. And I really do feel like that when we think of intelligence and when we have classified as intelligence, we're classifying knowledge and grouping of knowledge, which, throughout the decades, you had universities rising up of teaching and giving knowledge, and someone who's deemed intelligent was someone who could amass that knowledge from reading, from doing their studies, and be able to call upon that. And now with artificial intelligence, being able to source essentially all known knowledge throughout the ages, which is just crazy. But that we're deeming that intelligence when we look at all the huge moments of change throughout humanity and society has always been when man does something illogical or something that goes against what the common logic is. People used to think the earth was flat. People used to think, everything revolved around the earth. And all these guys who, and women throughout history who would call out these quote unquote illogical statements. They're throwing a wrench in the works. They're saying something that was opposing what logic was at the time or what knowledge and intelligence was saying. And people literally, they call them crazy, and they would write them off and say, no, that person's a nut job. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. Even the doctor who, when infections were on the rise, and he would tell them, I think there's this thing called germs. And he was researching and tinkering around in his own little, I think it was his lab at home. And he would use his microscope, and he kind of started discovering germs. And all the doctors, the entire medical community thought he was completely crazy, even though, they thought it was actually, they would blame it on quote unquote bad air. So when someone was dying of an illness, they would open all the windows and try to flush out the air when this guy's pointing at the germs going, no, this is what's killing people. This is what's causing the infections. And then since then, that's where you got hand washing, because people weren't washing hands before, and they started washing tools. But all these people who did these big movements throughout history where they were doing intelligent moves, they were actually doing things that were counterintuitive and not logical or almost like factual at the time, and they were written off. So my point is that with humans, is like the intelligence really does come from these creative, almost like you could say it's imaginary, right?
Well, or even like there's that human element of being reckless, where what separates, in my opinion, what separates good visual design from great visual design is knowing all of the rules and in design theory, right? And knowing specifically when and how much to break those rules. That leads to greatness. And artificial intelligence, again, is, yes, it's working with prompts, and yes, it can come down to a very creative person using the proper prompts, but it is still, the artificial intelligence is in the business of creating versus being creative.
And I think that kind of goes back to like what we mentioned, with creativity, it is about asking questions. It's about experimenting. It's about theories and hypothesis. And you look at the foundation of great science, that's the same foundation of science. It's asking questions and exploring. And like we said back on the clarity episode, was like, answers can be cheap and questions are expensive, because questions they get that clarity. They pull it out and make you really sometimes, look at things that are hard to look at and really figure out how to solve that. And right now, the answers are extremely cheap. Knowledge is being devalued because anyone can search anything, on Google. And now you have ChatGPT that will actually source this information for you and nuance it in a way to communicate it to you.
Okay. So I feel like we've really covered good tracks on artificial intelligence and the place for it. But how does it, with regards to brand, the place of AI in brand, whether it's brand development, whether it's the use of AI in brand touch points, what is there a place and a time, or is it all evil and should be shunned? could AI be used for brainstorming just weird out of the box things, just to have visual references to do. The times I could see is if I specifically said, hey, I want to look at if I was having to illustrate a little village from a certain era, being able to ask of AI to render certain types, right? I want a 2-story little cottage in this time frame in this country. It would be able to, in a sense, it acts like a super Google search.
Yep.
If you're researching, right? So to me, I see a practical application where it could be utilized, right? But it's nothing that then whatever's generated is going to be utilized for the actual visual touch points of a brand.
Yeah. I think, like your point of research and playing with ideas, throwing things against the wall, seeing what's sticking. Because I've done like verbal communication with it and just talking with it and talking through ideas and talking through concepts and exercising things with it, because then it's sourcing and being able to look at resources, whether it's medical journals or, college papers, whatever it is that's online. It can source these things and refer to them just like it can with art or art history and specific examples of that with visuals. I think the research side of it is huge from a brand development standpoint.
Yeah. It's funny, the times, we kind of kicked off this episode with just a fake, translator, an actual artificial intelligence reading, a text prompt, just kind of to be kind of lighthearted about kicking off the topic. But I've noticed more and more, even on social media marketing for brands, where I'm seeing, reels and that are acting as posts. There is in a sense, they're an ad, right? Yeah. Social media commercial as it appears in your feed. And I'm seeing so many more and more that I can clearly tell that they are using a computerized dictation app, filter, or artificial intelligence, whatever. And now it sounds more and more natural. I do give it credit for that, right? It's not the Siri that we kicked off, 5 years ago or whatever. But I think it's noticeable. And to me, I'm finding it almost the point of, as a consumer, almost a little off-putting, because I feel like it feels like, was the brand too cheap to just pay someone to actually record the narration for this commercial or whatever? Why are they cutting corners? And what does that say about the brand if they're cutting corners and trying to cut expense costs or whatever? Do they therefore cut corners in quality or in ingredients or in construction or build or whatever it is that they're doing? If I feel like they're cutting corners by using something that's super cheap or free, super easy to use to do something as much as speak to me as the consumer, I'd rather hear it from a human voice. I'd rather actually, hear it from a person, and not just, from a computerized digital narration.
That's a good point, because it's businesses using these things that can make certain operations much more efficient. It's going to become part of the business's decision and as a brand to figure out, okay, what things are worth the efficiency and what thing is worth the human efficiency, because humans aren't efficient. Our brains use an extremely high amount of calories. Like, your brain is one of the most inefficient organisms ever. And so even that alone, thinking is expensive. And being a human is very expensive because we aren't efficient. Computers are extremely efficient. And that's why they're cheap to run. They run off electricity. And so as a business, if they optimize everything, make everything efficient, it's like, what are you saying to the consumer? And I think there's something to consider in that, of going, okay, everything's gonna be automated. We're gonna have, AI handle the chat, AI handle the phones, AI handle the commercials. It's like, it starts becoming just so, like we were talking before, of like soulless, where there's no human part of it. Because as humans, we know humans make mistakes. We know humans are clumsy and we say the wrong words, or we, slip up sometimes, but that's part of being a human. And that's what we like about humans, is that we like seeing those flaws.
Yeah. Well, we were even talking earlier about how it used to be like, even this morning, I think when we got to the office, it was like, we were talking about, how eco, right? Sustainably eco-friendly brands used to pitch. That was like they were trying to just differentiate themselves back when, 10 years ago when everything was much more eco-conscious, and so you were seeing more and more brands, right?
Yep.
And then you found out that people were, that some companies were not being accurate or truthful in that claim, and therefore there was a lot of backlash, and so we're seeing less and less of that. And I'm even tired of brands using the name, the term sustainable. We're sustainable. We're, at the lowest sustainable costs and all stuff. And everyone's saying the same thing. And so, but I think sustainability is starting to wane and lose its impact and effect on the market. And I think the next wave that we're going to see brands embracing, if they can, and maybe it's going to be a new term, and this isn't the first time you and I have talked about this, but is the term like human made, right? I think just like you'd use, whether it's free range, whether it is local, GMO, or it's local, or whatever it is, you're going to see more and more brands embracing the claim that what they bring to the marketplace is human made. It's not AI crafted. It's not AI designed. It's not robotically manufactured. It's like kind of almost, I hope that we see almost a renaissance of going back to the art of when man would actually craft and goods had a higher value to them because they were literally not hand assembled, but handmade or human designed. Because now I think as we get more and more with the artificial intelligence being used in all forms of design, and there's places for that. I mean, if you were to approach an an AI computer with the task of having to reconfigure 5 freeways all coming together and all the ramps and all that, how to most effectively product flow. Now, could a person do it? Absolutely. I mean, and that's not disservice to that, but the amount of time, it's not a task everyone would be able the best suited for, but from a strategic analysis of fact and data, artificial intelligence is definitely going to have a place in helping us do time-saving tasks, and in design and in engineering. But when those things have to be more creatively, less logistically, and more creatively executed, I think with the terms of engineering, civil engineering, architectural engineering, science, right? Anything like that, that's going to require out-of-the-box thinking. Once you land on that, then AI is going to have a place.
I think it comes down to efficiencies versus effectiveness. And it's like, use a phone call of going, okay, it's efficient to have AI or an automated, voice system pick up the phone and direct the person through the phone tree. But what's the effectiveness of that as a brand? That's the first impression someone gets. And I know I get frustrated going through a phone tree with an automated system where it's just like I feel like I'm having to do the same thing over and over, and it's just like, and I know I'm not getting to the right place. So there's a frustration as a human where I'm like, man, if I just talk to a person, they could put me in the right lane to actually get what I'm trying to get.
I've been seeing more and more commercials. I can't remember. It's for it's got the gal from White Lotus, and she's the whole pitch is that you're actually talking to a human. When you call customer support, you're not working through a meandering maze of keypads only to get recordings, or you're actually talking with a person.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a huge advantage.
And it's just that idea of, I think more and more I'm so tired of going to a website, and if I have a technical issue and I go to the chat, right, contact that chat box. And it's literally, I'm typing in a question, and an AI is filtering through and trying to give me the proper response. And I find myself running myself in circles and having to backtrack. And I just want to,
I just write operator.
I just want to be able to call or text, a human that I can ask the right questions, or they can ask the right information from me.
Well, it's like the quote I was telling you about on LinkedIn, where the guy said, businesses are becoming more efficient in what's not effective in marketing. And I feel like that's a huge point in the sense of marketing is becoming extremely efficient. You can run A/B test ads, on Facebook, Instagram, all in one couple clicks. You can do stuff on Google. You can do all this crazy stuff. And I feel like it's not actually looking at the effectiveness of these things. And that's where effectiveness is completely driven by creativity. And that's what even like Peter Drucker said back, decades ago, saying the biggest expense of any business should be research and development and then marketing. And because those two things are what drive innovation and then drive that creativity from marketing, how it used to be. But that's what drives the business forward, and that's what benefits the customer, because it's driving both sides of the transaction forward for the customer and the business, which benefits everyone, part of like the whole economy.
Yeah. So it's just going to be interesting to see where it goes and how it impacts brand, and whether we're going to see a wave in the next couple of years of more and more companies and their brands, their logos, everything's starting to look the same. And I mean, we already see that in any market sphere, just with brand development. You see more and more. It's kind of like, same thing like the early 2000s, how it birthed the business names were always like something and something, copper and salt, or, wind and willow, or yeah.
Feather and brook.
Exactly. Right. Steel and timber. And it was like, whatever it was kind of the whole hipster movement, but it was like, it birthed this, like, to the point that any business coming out with that, it was like, oh my God, it's what everyone else is doing. And how are you differentiating yourself?
Or adding co at the end.
Yeah. It's just, it's an inundated wave of a trend. And I think AI right now is emerging as a good trend and visual alternative. And if anything, I look at it as a tool, just like you'd use anything else. As a visual problem solver, I use Google Images a lot. Type in a subject matter, and just to see what's out there, so I know what pitfalls to avoid as a designer, but also to just see it from the eyes of other things out there. It's a good splash in the pool of a subject matter, and that's for me part of my initial development and brainstorming session when I'm designing brands. Is that immerse myself in that, and the way to do that is to look at all the images and all the stuff that's out there. But I also, I as a human, I know that I'm looking for a solution that's unique from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, you're curating it. You're the gatekeeper there.
Yeah, and whereas I think artificial intelligence relies on that to see and find the common threads, and
what the average is, though.
Exactly. And that's, what's funny is the times that I've dabbled like with Adobe Firefly, just to even see like, okay, let's test drive this little fun tool. Right. And so I did like a query but what it was funny is that aside from slight style differences, the 3 images, because it works on a funnel, right? So you prompt it, and it'll usually give you about 3 images, and then you select ones that are either on point and you want to see more that are very similar, and you get more detailed, or it's like, oh, try again, or you change your prompt a little bit because it was off. But all of the images coming through are very much very similar, rather than a shotgun approach where it's like, boom, I'm going to try a solution in this direction, and this are all meeting that criteria, but just approaching it from a different angle, from a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. And I feel like that's, you imagine a brand, if someone is creating a brand from ground up and they're using AI to do so, it's like you're going to get an average brand because you're literally sourcing the average. You're sourcing the middle of the bell curve. It's just like if you built your brand completely off trends, just like you said with the naming. It's like if you built your entire brand based off all these trends, the trends eventually fizzle out, or you're in a trend, so therefore you're in the mass. You're in the mass movement of this certain thing, and that's what AI is deriving its results from. And so it's something to consider. Is that, again, it's efficient. It's like it's like having a sports car. Like you said, take it for a test drive. It's fun to drive around with these certain things, but when you need to actually pick up groceries or start hauling things or something like that, it's like you need different solutions for different things. You can't just use.
And it's not to say that trends in brands is something to avoid like the plague, because I think there's an aspect when you're built with your brand, you're always wanting to take a pulse on your brand to see, am I staying relatable? Am I and how do to me, how do you relate with the audience? You relate with whatever the audience is with the rest of their life. And a lot of times that involves trends, music trends, color trends, fashion trends, whatever it is, right? You want to be relatable to the audience. So if trends are part of your audience's life, it's okay to but don't rely on them, don't follow them, don't continually stay in the course. It's a matter of like somehow leaning into the trends without mirroring the trend. But going back to artificial intelligence, I think, one of the we talk about brand experience and brand touch points and all these things and brand clarity. And a lot of that comes into messaging. Mm-hmm. So I know a big component of is utilizing AI for composition, for writing.
Yeah.
And you could tell it, hey, give me a 500-word summary article on a topic for a beginner entry level of this topic, explaining this, and it would write it out. It would source all these different essays and papers and Wikipedia things and all this stuff and deliver that for me. So whether it's, again, it's a matter of cutting corners. Like, for instance, a copywriter or someone, that would manage copy, come up with the headline, come up with that slogan, whatever it is. AI, definitely has a place right now with a lot of people using it and being comfortable with it. And I think that what's the biggest danger that lies in that?
Is that the bottom line is that it's nuanced. And I feel like everything we do as humans, the things that really matter as humans, whether it's social or in business, it's very nuanced. And I feel like even when it comes to brands and messaging and word selection, it's an extremely nuanced thing depending on who I'm talking to, who's in the room, right? What mood everyone's in, what the point I'm trying to make, the topic that I'm talking about. All of those things are to be considered. And frankly, AI, from my experience with it can't do that. It can't handle or think of those kind of nuances that I may be trying to either put into the messaging or into the visuals or the strategy or the nuances I'm trying to consider in that situation. And I feel like that's what really, when it comes down to being human, it's like there are nuances. There's nuances to all aspects of our lives. And that's really like what you're learning since being a child. You're learning these social cues, all these different nuances of just how to live your life. And really, it's like you can't get that from the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see where, artificial intelligence goes from here and how it continues to evade not all sectors, but even more with brand. It's for the same reason I think, there's efficiencies. You brought up efficiencies. It's, for the visual elements, it's like Fiverr or Crowdspringer. A lot of these, super cheap. It's like looking for a logo and seeing one made, and it's just like your company name. Yeah. Types underneath it, and you're like, oh, that's great. And it's $40. Yeah. And you feel like, oh, it's professional. It has that image I'm looking for, and all that. And in the end, it's a disservice because it's generic, it's templated, it's
not effective.
Yeah,
it works. It fulfills an expectation. It's efficient in that. But then it's like there's three levels. There's time and money well saved, time and money well spent, and then there's time and money well invested. And so along those three steps, it's like AI and Fiverr and all these things are down in the time and money well saved. And really you have to consider, okay, is that not only is that a right move for a business, but also is that how I want to signal? Because people know. People can look at it and they'll know. And so I think it's just something to consider. And I think really as a business, always looking at efficiencies versus effectiveness.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things too, when I was kind of researching more about the place of AI and things, is that the possible risk of AI utilizing copyrighted material.
Oh yeah, and that's actually, there's been a lot of movements of organizations starting to form to protect creatives and people who have material out there, but also even with Sora. Right now, Sam Altman, Sora is their visual creator that's creating these cool ads and all that. That's actually generative. But they're not saying where they're actually sourcing this. And there's been several interviews where, they'll ask them, okay, where is it getting this intake of video? Yeah. And it could be getting anything from your kid's Facebook profile. Like it could be taking their face and using that as inspiration for a character in a short film or a commercial. And so, or using something from a company's website of, their staff photos or staff videos or anything like that, or a commercial they've done. So it's like, where does the line get drawn? So as you can tell, it's like things start getting extremely blurry as it's sourcing so much information and data.
Yeah.
But that's going to be huge. Yeah, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be probably a lot of legal requirements and legal, a lot of regulation. It'd be interesting to see what, in the coming months. I mean, you want to say the coming years, but the way this tech advances, you got to be talking about in the coming weeks, not necessarily the coming years, because it's like we've opened up Pandora's box on what's possible. And I think when we resort to, machines doing all of our thinking, then I feel like we really what have we become left? If they replace all of our livelihoods for how we get things done, whether it's, working on a factory floor.
Yeah. And I think if, again, focusing on efficiencies, effectiveness, and being wise of how you use it, it's a tool. It definitely is a tool. Yeah. And it can be used for great, things. And I think that's where we have to.
Great power comes great responsibility. And
that came to mind.
Yes, and it took me to say it, but it's a tool. It has a place, but look at it simply as a tool, not the go-to solution.
Yep. Yeah.
Because you're never going to be able to trump just the out-of-the-box thinking that comes from the human mind.
Yeah.
And those that like to play.
Yeah. Because, again, the Earth used to be flat.
All righty. Well, until next time, guys, thanks for tuning in. And cheers.